a topic that is on issues that are barely covered in the mainstream media. Each one of them represents issues that are hardly covered in the media. So you can see how much we have to talk about. So the idea is that each of them that are from across the country will talk about issues they believe that mainstream media either covers really badly, does not cover at all, or keeps covering in the same wrong way. And all of them that we've discussed over the last few days, as soon as I asked them, can you talk about something that is not covered in the media much, all of them, what is there to say, how much will I go on saying? That was their first response from all of them. So clearly, we do know how much we have to beg editors to try and to even publish kind of unseen communities, stories about unseen communities, angles that they constantly want to not give it much importance. And I thought although they have a lot of things, they would have a lot of things to say. There are some people who are sitting also who have mentioned some ideas that they would like to share. So
Lakshmi and Samira are the note takers. Also, we're just trying to organize the translation like last time. तो सुमिता है वहाँ, सुमिता आप हाथ अपना खड़ा कर दें, जो अंग्रेजी से हिंदी में ट्रांसलेट कर सकती हैं. तो जो खबर लहरिया से हमारे दोस्त हैं, आप लोग उनके पास बैठ जाएं पीछे. किसी और को भी अंग्रेजी से हिंदी में ट्रांसलेशन चाहिए जब सेशन चल रहा हो तो वो छोटे ग्रुप में बैठ के हो सकता है. सुमिता के पास आप चले जाएं. पुष्पा की का जो और तेलुगु
can someone who can speak Tamil? I think Tamil and maybe Tamil and Malayalam. Can you sit with people from Tamil Nadu and do the Hindi to Tamil translation? And
Telugu, you have Padma Priya and Vasu.
Alright, so let's begin. I thought I'll share one thing that I'm always fighting with as a freelancer. Also, I'm trying to publish certain issues that I feel don't get covered. But sometimes I think there are certain angles that don't get covered, and that's what I've struggled with most. For example, recently around the whole controversy and the protests around women going into the Sabrimala temple, the two of them. When I met them, I found because I was asked to wait as a print journalist while all the TV journalists were going and asking them for their interview and talking to them. I found all of them asked the very same questions, and after nearly 4 hours, they answered it all each time as if they were answering for the first time. They were so gracious. But at the end of 4 or 5 hours, I felt like those questions didn't answer anything. And then after that, I think it also helped that I was there for 5 hours. When they did talk about their lives, that is when it got all the questions that were really, people wanted to know whether they were really, why they wanted to go, who they were, how did they meet. All the questions were answered by just being there for some more time. And this, I felt a lot of people had not written about at all. They became kind of fixed personality, fixed people without a background, without a history, without even a relationship with the society they live in. So I feel like there are some angles that by just hanging around we do get, and this doesn't get covered. I'm sure they will add a lot. I'll go in the order they're sitting. First we have Pushpa Rokde. She is a journalist in Chhattisgarh, and she last year when she had come and last year when she come to the meeting, she spoke really articulately about life, living there, the dangers they face, and also covering issues that they actually live and the risks they face. Today she said that she would talk about the dilemmas that a journalist in Bastar, in areas that have conflict and violence in Chhattisgarh face, and those dilemmas and how she deals with them. Thank you.
मेरा नाम पुष्पा रोकड़े है. मैं छत्तीसगढ़ के बीजापुर जिले में दैनिक प्रखर समाचार के लिए लिखती हूँ और मैं इस अखबार में पिछले 16 साल से लिख रही हूँ और काम कर रही हूँ. पहले तो मैं जगदलपुर में रह के काम करती थी, फिर मुझे क्राइम को देखते हुए मुझे बीजापुर भेजा गया और मैं बीजापुर में क्राइम रिपोर्टिंग करने लगी. धीरे धीरे मुझे आदिवासी के साथ जो फर्जी एनकाउंटर होना, पुलिस का मारना पीटना, उनको अंदर करना, ये सारी चीजें मेरे पास आने लगी। और मैं भी खुद एक आदिवासी लड़की हूँ, इसलिए मुझे लगा कि नहीं, मुझे इनसे जुड़ना चाहिए और इनकी मदद करनी चाहिए। एज ए मीडिया पर्सन भी इनके लिए लिखना चाहिए, ताकि सरकार भी इनको सुने और देखे कि इनको वास्तव में कैसी मदद चाहिए।
Do I need to translate it? Yeah. They're translating, I think, at the back.
मैं बीजापुर के कई एरिया पे काम की हूँ, कई गांव पे काम की हूँ, पर सबसे ज्यादा मैंने पामेड़ एरिया पे काम किया है। बासागुड़ा एक जगह है जहाँ पिछले टाइम काफी चीजें बाहर आई, की रिपोर्टिंग करने के बाद प्रशासन और पुलिस मुझे अच्छी नजर से नहीं देखती थी। उनको लगता था कि मैं उनके खिलाफ जा रही हूँ, उनके खिलाफ लिखती हूँ। तो अकेली महिला होने के कारण भी, और दूसरा जितने पत्रकार पुरुष हैं वो सारे लोगों ने मुझे अलग कर दिया था और अकेली मैंने संघर्ष किया। कुछ टाइम मैं शांत रही, मतलब 2-3 महीने मैं शांत रही। फिर उसके बाद मैंने सोचा कि शायद मुझे अपने काम करने का तरीका बदलना होगा, तब जाके सरकार उससे जुड़ेगी, प्रशासन मेरा सुनेगा और मैं इन गांव वालों की कुछ मदद कर पाऊंगी। तो मैंने सबसे पहले शांत रहने के बाद एक काम किया कि रिपोर्टिंग के लिए मैं पामेड़ गई, जो बीजापुर का लास्ट और छत्तीसगढ़ का लास्ट एरिया पड़ता है। यहाँ लगभग 5000 की आबादी है इस गांव की। यहाँ सड़क नहीं है, पानी नहीं है, बिजली नहीं है। यहाँ किडनी की बीमारी से कम 26 लोगों की डेथ हो चुकी है और कई लोगों को इलाज चल रहा है। तो ये लोग अपने इलाज के लिए आंध्र प्रदेश पर डिपेंड है, वो आंध्रा जाके अपना इलाज करवाते थे। तो ये सारी चीजें मुझे पता चली, मैं गई वहां और ये सारा चीज रिपोर्टिंग करके 3 दिन में वापस आई, अपने कलेक्टर साहब से मिलके उनको बताया मैंने, और मैंने खबर भी लिखा और उनके लिए अच्छा ये लिखा कि अय्याज तंबोली हमारे कलेक्टर अब करेंगे पामेड़ का विकास। मैंने उनको फंसा दिया अपने खबर से, तो वो भी खुश हो गए, बोले हाँ पुष्पा मेरे को चैलेंज भी कर रही है और बोल भी रही है कि करना है। तो उन्होंने फिर फटाफट पंचायत भवन, डाकघर, एक रोड का निकाल दिया। फिर उन्होंने बोला कि नहीं, वृद्धा पेंशन के लिए सचिवों का सचिवालय भी बनना चाहिए, तो छोटा सा वो कर दिया। फिर की सुरक्षा के लिए कैंप, तो 1000 जवानों के लिए कैंप भी बने जगह जगह। और उस गांव में रोजगार के रूप में 10 घर में दुकान खुल गए और लोग आज ठंडा बेचते हैं, जहाँ कभी सोच भी नहीं सकते थे कि वहाँ ठंडा मिलेगा, वहां से ठंडा मिल रहा है। वो सिर्फ जवानों का दुकान खुलना मतलब उनके लिए रोजगार का साधन भी आया वो। फिर कलेक्टर साहब ने सोचा कि नहीं ये सब करना है, तो उन्होंने किया। और सबसे अच्छी बात ये लगी मुझे कि मैं जब एसपी साहब के पास गई, जो एसपी साहब मुझे कभी सुनना नहीं चाहते थे, उन्होंने बैठ के मुझे सुना और बोला कि हाँ, इस कल्पना में मैं तुम्हारे साथ हूँ, और क्या चाहिए बताओ। तो मैंने बोला कि अरे ये तो मतलब सच में अच्छा हो रहा है। तो फिर मैंने उनको बोला, सर आपके भी जवान है वहाँ पे जो अपने परिवार से दूर रहते हैं, उनकी बातें अपने परिवार से नहीं हो पाती, कई त्योहार में लगता है कि अच्छा करवा चौथ है तो मेरी बीवी से कम बात हो जाती। तो मैंने आप नेटवर्क का कुछ कर दीजिए उनके लिए। तो उन्होंने मतलब एकदम फटाफट 1 महीने के अंदर बीएसएनएल का नेटवर्क वहां पर खड़ा कर दिया। सारे जवानों ने मुझे इतना थैंक यू बोला ना कि मतलब आप सोच भी नहीं सकते, और मैं उस चीज को मतलब आपको बता नहीं सकती कि मुझे इतना अच्छा लगा कि ये लगा कि ये जो जिंदगी मुझे मिली है इसका मैंने सही उपयोग किया पामेड़ वालों के लिए। बस
Let me quickly translate and summarize that. I can't do as good a translation as Divya did, word to word. But some of the experiences that Pushpa shared was actually about living and covering living in a place and covering issues about communities that she belongs to herself. The village, she talked about a village where a lot of people suffered and died of kidney-related diseases, and many of them would go to Andhra Pradesh or Andhra area for treatment. And then she wrote about this. She found out, and she wrote about this, and it turned. And then she wrote a line in there that the collector of the area is going to, vikas karenge. So he's going to develop that area, and that immediately made him both happy and responsible. She said unko fasa diya, which is she trapped him into doing work. And then after that, she talks also about another situation where some of the soldiers who are posted there. I think they mentioned to her that there was no way for them to contact, and she wrote, and then they got the phone network. And after that, she says that, in the end, she just said that she feels like she made good use of her own life for the sake of people living there. What? Okay. Anyone can ask her questions later on, then she will respond. Next to her is Gunavathy. She's based in Tamil Nadu, and she's a new member. And she said that she'd talk about covering caste violence in rural areas.
Hi, this is Gunavathy. I'm from Chennai, Tamil Nadu. I'm here to mention just one problematic issue which we are facing in Tamil Nadu, and I hope it is there everywhere. It is about naming and mentioning of the people who are subjected to atrocities. Dalits, Adivasis, minorities. I just want to brief it with a single example. There is this girl named XYZ in a village in Tamil Nadu. She gets raped. She's 12 years old. And TV medias, especially. I'm working in a mainstream magazine, but I just want to talk in general that many channels or online medias and some small magazines reporting, like they are mentioning the girl's name and their parents' name and where they are located, and they are mentioning everything about their location and everything, but they are the rapist is mentioned as an upper caste man. That's all. There is no name, there is no nothing, there is no community name mentioned, and there is nothing. I'm not just giving this as a freak statement. I've read a lot. In our thing, in our circle in Tamil newspapers and magazines and channels, I've seen that I was unable to get any details of that so-called upper caste man. I think we are losing the sensibility everywhere. Irrespective of channels, magazines, or anything. I just want to mention this problem is existing and what we can do to eradicate this. I'm actually expecting the valuable suggestions from here. I'm seeking this from you all senior journalists. And what can we do to address this problem? And I really want to speak about the Dalit, Adivasi, or minority representation in newsrooms. Because I personally feel, because of our privilege, we are unable to, or intentionally or unintentionally, we are not actually addressing their problems in a very exact way. So I'm also seeking the suggestions to eradicate this problem also. I'm actually here to seek suggestions. I'm not here to, I just want to get some valuable suggestions for these two problems. I hope you will be helping us. Thank you.
You also you want to talk about when you do cover it, when you do cover these issues. How do you approach it? Can you say a bit about that?
When I was there, in a similar story, it was a caste violence. 3 people from the Parayar community were killed. There, I was facing a problem like, why should you? I was not able to face that crowd. From the police officers. In fact, police officers and those officials who are dealing with that crime is not allowing to. Is not allowing me to talk with them. That so-called upper caste men who did that crime. We are facing this extremely we are facing this problem extremely in a larger degree in this 3-4 years. I think you can understand what I'm coming to say. We are, although it is there, some other party ruling in Tamil Nadu, there is this fear among journalists and secular-minded people that we are actually we are facing obstacles to not to reveal their names or not to reveal their identities and their location and things. So that's right. I'm coming to say that I'm facing the serious problem. I'm facing the problem. Like I was unable to expose their identities. So what should I do? Apart from all these things, what can we do in a group? As a collective, what can we do to make this problem right, and how could we correct it? I'm just seeking solutions. No, because we are talking about this, but we are not getting the answers. So I hope I will give some enlightenment.
Actually, I thought that what would match well with what Gunavathy just talked about was what Revati said she'd talk about, where she has spent many years, how many years now? 10? 9.
For
Thinking about it for a long time.
And 10 before that. So,
Yes. So she has been writing about and has published a book on perpetrators of communal violence in Gujarat, and specifically spent time with those who are actually committing the violence. She thought that is also something that is barely covered in the mainstream media. Just as Gunavathy said, perpetrators of violence go scot-free, are not analyzed, are not questioned, or even we don't know their point of view often, except in their most violent and political ways. So, Revati, can you talk about that? And the questions which Gunavathi asked, more suggestions that she wanted, I hope when we, more of us speak, we will also address those questions.
So I basically spent the last 4 years on the ground living in Gujarat in order to understand where mob violence, particularly religious violence, which is basically the fulcrum around which all our politics currently revolves, where this mob violence comes from. Because the Sangh Parivar is using something, the seed of which exists within us. So actually the idea came from when I was posted as a television journalist from NDTV to Gujarat in the year 2003, immediately after the genocide against Muslims, in which the government records say a little less than 1,000 Muslims were killed, but actually civil society reports say that over 2,000 Muslims were killed. And the structural violence against them in Gujarat continued, and then that is what buoyed up the present regime to its present catastrophic proportions, where we're now across the country facing the prospect of having put in a majoritarian government, majoritarian regime in place, which is breaking all of our institutions one after the other. So when I moved to Gujarat, everywhere I went, people would say, "Madam, आपको समझ में नहीं आएगा हमने बवाल का support क्यों किया?" The bawal is the word used specifically for riots. So everybody said, "You won't understand why we're supporting the mob." And I said, "Yes, but that's precisely why I was there." And then I asked myself, what is the point of any work I do as a journalist if I'm only talking to people who already think like me? How do you reach beyond that? And if you don't reach people who don't think like you, you're actually shrinking the liberal space and therefore increasing the space of violence. And I'm also then guilty of setting up a further polarization or binary between we the liberal and those who are not liberal. And how do you prevent that from continuing? Because that is what we're living today. And I failed at finding an answer initially. And then a year later, the answer sort of fell into my lap accidentally. I was actually at a place where a historian from Bombay had come down and was talking to radicalized Indian youth who had taken part in the violence of 2002 and trying to change their minds and make them less prejudiced against Muslims by saying, okay, these things that the middle class Hindu keeps bandying about, saying Muslims Muslims cheer on for the Pakistani team, you're in a cricket match and all of that. Where does all of that prejudice come from? How much of it is truth? How much of it is marginalization? How much of it is fiction? And so I found that interesting. And when I finished filming him, I turned the camera to the first person sitting in front of me and I said, "Aapko ye sab sun ke kuch hasil hua?" He said, "Meri to puri thinking hi badal gayi hai." Now that for me was, I had gooseflesh because I had never come across anyone who could let go. I hadn't even thought of the possibility that violence that causes the death and destruction of a community can change. This man is someone who was saying he's changed. And that made me sit up and think. I said, we are describing this space of violence as something that is fixed. And if we're describing it as fixed, we're fixing it. And that for me became the answer to my question. How do you reach out to the other side? By telling them their own stories of guilt, of uncertainty, because all of us are uncertain of what we are. We're not sure. And uncertainty is the space of openness. When you are certain, you're actually moving towards a fascist space. So I decided that I wanted to actually focus on people who took part in the mob to understand where this violence comes from. This man changed. He went from being at the edge of the mob to a left liberal atheist over the course of a decade. And that became the subject, one of the parts of my book. But the other part is a man. There are three people. One is a Bhil, a tribal from an impoverished part of Gujarat. One is someone who was from a denotified criminal tribe, a tribe that was criminalized for ever since 1871. So they faced over 100 years of discrimination till many of them became criminals. And it's from amongst that group that the next protagonist for my book emerged, who was someone who cut and killed Muslim women, raped them, and bragged about it later, saying, "I pulverized Muslim women till they were pickled." Now, the reason that he bragged about this was the most disturbing. We tend to focus on the individual crime, and that then, to my mind, becomes a voyeuristic process because you're saying, "Oh God, this happened." But you're not actually seeing that the more important thing to do is to explain the group complicity of everyone in this. Why is it that everybody else who was cheering on actually secretly wants this to be done but doesn't have the guts to say so, so they're pegging it on the man who's doing it for them? Why is the bragging happening? Why in all the mutated versions of 2002 that we see in our midst today, are people filming this and putting it out there? We haven't asked ourselves why or attempted to answer that. So that is what I've tried to do in this book. And I felt that to my mind, is my answer to the question of how do you break this wall between the liberal and the illiberal. By saying, let's understand where this illiberalism comes from and what part of it are we playing in our everyday. I mean, after the Holocaust in Nazi Germany, there was a lot of revisionist history a few decades later, where people like Hannah Arendt talked about the banality of evil. She talked about how this is an everyday exercise. Until we break down the violence in everyday and stop just doing the handling, "Oh my God, this has happened," and just describing it. That's a flat narrative that actually doesn't tell you the body of distress or the body of distress that all of us have created together. We see ourselves as separate from this. And so we're pushing these people further and further with their backs to the wall. And therefore, the violence is actually increasing because what is this government standing on? It is standing on the collective guilt of the people of Gujarat and of the rest of mainstream Hindutva India. And to which the Sangh Parivar and our Prime Minister said, I understand why you're reacting like this. We are not giving these people an alternative go-to space. The alternative go-to space could be a cathartic space. Why I found that this I could just be sitting on the surface of something where if anyone else wants to explore this could go much deeper even, is that, I sat across a dhaba from one person. He didn't become a protagonist in the book because he ran away after that. But within 10 minutes of speaking to an absolute stranger, he said, I was responsible for killing 10 people. Now, a lot of people just want to let this out. And I discovered that violence is something people committed as part of a group fantasy. What is the fantasy? And it doesn't last forever. So what I've done is describe what I've experienced in trying to uncover something that we've not looked at before. We all have amnesia about this violence. So we like looking at how the violence, what happens through the violence, how it's articulated and how the victims feel. But we refuse to look at the perpetrators because actually all of us somewhere as a middle class have a blindness to this because it goes back into the original sin of the partition and the creating of an idea of India as opposed to an idea of Pakistan. And so every time people say, 2002 happened, that was one genocide, one politically driven genocide, but there was another in 1984 where the Sikhs were killed. So all parties do this. I said that is a zero-sum game, and actually it's not even a correct equivalent, it's a false equivalent, because when you look at 2002, it plugs back into the original sin of the creation of India and Pakistan, which is Hindu versus Muslim, which is not the same as Hindu versus Sikh or Hindu versus Christian. And also it's always Hindu versus something. And that should make us think. So unless we discuss who this Hindu is and why we have these fantasies of violence, we're going to keep perpetuating this as we are.
Thanks, Revati. Grace said that, she... Can I come to you now? Yeah? Grace is a journalist based in Manipur. I come from a state which is very problematic in every situation. I would like to talk about political reporting from there. As you understand, since we have a huge presence of what you call insurgents and what we call political movement there, and the position of reporters there would be to balance out this one vis-a-vis its positioning is balancing the militants and the military, the media. So this is like a triangle position that we continue to balance there. This is also because we know how unsafe we are there. So we have learned to position ourselves in this safe, survival position. But I just want to push a little bit and share certain things today, hoping that perhaps you will be able to see things differently when you look at reporting from there or the vacuum of misreporting from there. So it's very difficult. So what is anti-state in that state? What is anti-state in Manipur? Will it be because the state, the GOI is seen as an illegitimate establishment there, and so as a reporter, which position are we going to take to report about the situation there? And are we allowed? Do you imagine that every reporter is apolitical, and that apolitical might be a position by itself? So everything comes from there. And I'm saying this because as an insider, because for an outsider it's very convenient. Very convenient. I would say that because I've always been watching and following, of course. I remember that during Sharmila's fasting days, there would be people coming in the only two things that is important to them to report from Manipur would be to have a meeting with Sharmila, appointment with her, and to report from Ima market. So it's for trying to that.
But Sharmila's protest started very recently. We have been facing AFSPA from, especially in the Naga areas, in the 4 hill districts. We have been facing AFSPA since the since 48. So that huge experience of women in conflict areas and the feminization of the workforce as a fallout of conflict completely absent anywhere. It's very, very unfortunate. Nobody even cared. And that kind of distance us more from the so-called mainstream. I mean, I'm saying this with a lot of emotions actually. And the only time that I remember that there was a fear reporting was in 2004 where there was a naked protest. My question is, do we really need to go to that heights to get your attention? But there are things there where we need to build our sisterhood and we empathize more the experience and it should not be. I'm shaking. Have some water. Sorry.
The triangle with which you're talking is. And please you.
No, I think I should. I don't know how many of you knows about 1987, the Operation Bluebird, which was horrendous. It completely occupies 31 villages for 3 months, and the scale of violence, especially against women, is unimaginable in the history of India. But nobody knows about it because nobody cares to report. Nobody even follows the Supreme Court case on that till date. So that's the kind of absence that we are deprived from the mainstream media. And politics from the periphery is, of course, very sensitive. It's very sensitive because, for instance, when Sharmila gave up her fast, I want to talk about Sharmila because she's the more popular name among all of you. So when she gave up her fast, of course, there was a lot of outlash against her. None of the people in Imphal could horse her, even after she stopped her fasting and was free to go. That very night where she was free to go, she had to end up in the police station because she has nowhere to go. And there are only 2 tribal reporters operating from Imphal. I happens to be one of them. She ultimately came to me and asked me if I can shelter her. I sheltered her for almost 2 months. Because I had the privilege of being a tribal, otherwise my house would be bombed, and because I'll be threatened if I'm a Meitei, but I happen to be a tribal in Imphal, where the Meitei cannot have a direct, what we call position on me. But I do get a lot of information that it's so unsafe to have her because you have a bone threat. But that's the kind of solidarity that we have to give to each other as women, much more than just speaking to each other. So we don't have to exploit each other as women. We have to give this solidarity towards each other whenever it's required across the ethnic divide. Of course, there's a apparent ethnic divide. There are 34 recognized tribes in the state, it's a very paradox situation where 40% of the tribals live in 92% of the geographical area. So the 8% of the geographical area is occupied by the 60% of the non-tribals. So we do have this internal politics there, that being the reason. A lot of tribal perspectives are also absent in the local media, where there's because especially in the English, even in the English media based in Imphal, both print and electronic, there's a lot of in the recent years, there's been some attempt, but still very pathetic. So that's the kind of silence that we felt, and I feel that's very violent. That silence is very violent. And this one thing which I feel is very important and which is silent. This is, do the militants have rights? Do militants have rights? Because you see them as militants, we see them as insiders who are fighting our political identity rights. So do they have rights? Do they have rights within the ceasefire? Do they have rights within the surrendering policy? So these are questions which we need to ask. I'll give you a concrete example of two cases. One is like the government is trying to it's making like ceaseless attempt for the militants to surrender. But after they surrender, like their life is death right there. That literally, because they have to be there inside the campus every day and sign there, which means like they cannot go out and move and look for work. And even if they go out and look for work, nobody's willing to employ them because it's a very fragile political scenario. And so they don't get work once they surrender. Once they become a militant, they don't get work anywhere. Not even as a Mason, they don't get work anywhere. So within that, the only survival they have is to get food and a stipend from the government, which is promised. But the stipend is not given for years. So what has actually happened in Manipur is the various group of people who surrender, inside the surrendering camp, they became one. Outside they were fighting against each other because they also have their ideological clash among themselves. But within they grouped together as one. And I remember that they have had 2 press conferences, which I attended. It must be more. I've attended 2 press conferences where they say they want to sue the government in a legal recourse for not giving them what they deserve. And nobody picks up on this. So this, do they have rights after they surrender? And who is following their rights, And when the government completely denies them their right to survival. This is one thing which I want to bring to the House. The other thing which I want to bring to the House is the government is trying to silence voice at every level. And so anything to do with which is anti-government is always very problematic. So even in small, like for example, if someone files, even in small matters like RTI, if someone files an RTI, the government used the militants. Our proximity with the militants is like not only for the ordinary members, but for everyone, even people in the politics. So they used the militants to threaten this person who had filed the RTI. So it's like, the intimidation comes at various levels, in various scales. This is not a one-time situation, and you can do nothing. Like if you report, you die immediately. So you just have to forget that you ever filed an RTI. So I was the first person to file an RTI in my district, and I thought that was like amazing that we finally have an RTI where I was an activist then, and I was working on school education, and so I thought it was an amazing opportunity, but that's how it was defeated in the situation. And and I'm sure you have heard about the recent case of, I'm sure this thing might, because I have another colleague from my state, Anju, I'm sure she will pick up on this, that, you can't even say anything that is anti, and it's even more strange now because recently one of the journalists is behind bars, and I'm sorry to say that the solidarity from the other parts is much less than what we anticipated in this case. I'll stop there.
I think because she also referred to Anjulika, being also from the same state, and just come to you.
Thank you, Grace, for making things easier for me. Because usually I'm the one who goes around saying that people expect us to write only about Sharmila and the Imam market. As Grace said, we come from a very small state, but a very diverse universe. I would say it's a universe. And it's equally much more difficult for us, people like Grace and me, because we are also women there, like some of the few women reporters there. And to put it very briefly, our media houses, the media houses there, started in Delhi, as she said, most of them are concentrated in Delhi. But now there's much more sizable population all over the district. But most of them started out as political mouthpieces. But a recent transition over the last decade or so has been that many of these media houses are now either co-opted or taken over by the government or people close to the government, or by businessmen. So so what you see reported in the media there is like following the who's and who's of politicians or would-be politicians. What we were talking about election coverage, and the one thing that struck my mind is like how many of the coverages that we do there is like following up a man also who calls himself so-called social worker with his ACB, trying to fix a road. And we know that anybody who calls himself doing that and are taking the media along would be fighting, contesting for election next time round. So there's the kind of like so-called paid, non-paid or co-opted journalism that we have there. And that within a very traditional patriarchal system, which makes things much more worse for us. Our media houses do not have shift systems. They have outdated computers and mostly male, and no separate toilets for women. And so if you so much as expect that a person like me, who or like Chris, who would be very vocal about having even separate toilets or even having putting forward the issues of trying to put the gender discourse to the conflict or to the politics that's happening there. So we have to face a lot of struggle. But I am saying this with a very positive aspect to it also, because now I see a lot of young girls coming out, and we are expecting a lot from them. But one thing I would, as I was talking to Rohini, is that I also worked for a long time in Delhi. So I went to Srinagar, I was taken to Srinagar to do a parachute journalism during one of the worst periods. And I found like in Delhi, I could not just grasp what Delhi is all about. Like, I could not grasp, I could not write proper stories.
We can't.
Yeah. And when I went to Srinagar, I was there for 1 week. Kaju, he hosted us, he took us around, and there were friends from Srinagar, journalists, they took us around, they tried to make us understand. And I realized that a week, how can I produce even one story in a week? So the only story that I wrote was about a house. It was not about people. It was about a house, which was that upper portion. I don't know what they call it, Diana. They said it was all empty and dust covered. I said no, but it was that open balcony and it had a perfect view when I'm looking out from there. And they said during marriage and all, like the women would gather there and they'll see the bride and bridegroom coming and they'll be gathered. And that was the only thing that struck my mind, because this lady, her only son was killed. And I was looking at it from the perspective of that veranda. It will never see a bride entering the house or a bridegroom coming in. And it never even saw the son, the dead body of the son, because he was one of the disappeared. And these are the kind of stories that we've been trying to do in Manipur also. Because when you see the coverage of the conflict in Manipur, or maybe even Nagaland, or even the whole of Northeast put together, very recent thing is the Citizenship Amendment Bill. And in Manipur, the pages are covered, the front page is covered with it. News discussion, everything. I doubt whether Delhi has been talking about it, or whether any metropolis has been talking about it. For us, it matters much more, because we come from an area where our, as everyone has been talking about, we come from an area where the notion of statehood or even nationhood has been imposed on us, and is still a very alien thing to us. We are trying to come to terms with it in our own different ways. Some of us violently, some of us silently, some of us just okay, going with the flow. So the number of voices that or which are unheard, or the silences, it's just keeps piling up. Just like Grace was saying that the Oinam case, how the Supreme Court case, like when I was doing a media fellowship on sexual violence and impunity, I was trying to find papers on it, or maybe even follow up on the legal things that's going on about it. What's the latest legal status? And they said, whether, like, it's all there in trunks, locked up in trunks, and it takes us a long time even finding those trunks. And Grace was talking about 31 villages, right? Which were surrounded, like captured, kept for 3 months or more, and atrocities which occurred. And for a long time we've been writing about this. We started talking about the number of young women who are widowed by the conflict, and how the problems they're facing, whether their husband was a common man, a policeman, or a militant. It was the problems that the women and their children were facing were almost the same. I made films on that, I wrote about that, but after a certain point of time, I started asking myself, like, how much longer should I keep writing for those voices to be heard? Like, and so I reached, like I was telling Rohini also, I sort of like past 1 year or 2 years or so, I reached that kind of stage where I just don't want to write anymore. Right? Because how much longer, how many times will I keep asking Sharmila's, Manorama's mother? Everyone comes trying to talk about the protest, like youth protest, how Manorama was killed. Everyone goes asks Manorama's mother, what do you want now? How many times would I ask her mother, what do you want now? When she has seen her daughter being killed in that way. How many times will I ask those those Mairapavi women who disrobe, how they feel? How they felt at that time? How they feel now? That's the kind of follow-up that we do, that okay, 10 years ho gaya, how do they feel now? The demands which they had at the time, do you think is fulfilled now? 15 years ho gaya, what do they feel now? And some of these mothers, they say, like, we don't want to speak about it anymore. So this whole, I'm just linking it up to the session last night about how, like, opening up. How much of opening is required? When do we say that, okay, we have done enough opening, we don't want to trouble you anymore? How do we learn to just write about the silences, which does not require words? Yeah, I'm just doing this in a very literary way because I have sort of taken a short break from journalistic writing and doing a little bit of literary foray, where I'm working with a group of women writers from Manipur. But looking at how in their poems, stories and essays, they are trying to locate the women themselves, their voices, their place in our society.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
I think I'd like maybe actually, would you like to talk now? Yeah. Akangchila is an associate editor in Nagaland today, and when I asked her what she wanted to talk about today, she just sent me one sentence email, and she said, Nagaland, more than conflict and politics.
Yeah, and I think Grace and Anjulika kind of like set the perfect words for me, my opening words. Because what I'm going to talk about is an extension of exactly what they have said. But I want to push it a notch further, and go beyond conflict and politics. Because I think there is a different kind of representation about between reporting that comes from within the state and from outside the state. So I think writing and reporting about Nagaland has, it's been obsessed. I feel like there's been 2 points which a lot of writers from within and outside have been obsessed about. First is, I think, tribalism, which is Naga headhunting and Naga headhunters, and also conflict, like Naga insurgents. So I think that obsession with these two things has kind of overtaken more important issues which is happening in Nagaland. And I just want to give you all a glimpse of working as a journalist for the past 10 years in Nagaland. I feel like nobody is looking at the ways like Nagaland is adjusting to being a post-conflict space on the edge of India and South Asia. Nobody's really looking at the real Nagaland and Nagas and how we are adjusting to living in that space. So I think I've been exposed to a lot of awesome writers, journalists, reporters here, and I think a lot of things can be done, a lot of stories can come out, besides conflict, besides Hornbill Festival. So I just want to raise a few pointers, like how about we talk about the new dynamics which is happening in Nagaland? How about the new markets for luxury goods, which seems to be on the rise every single day? How about new consumerism that seems to be sweeping Nagas and Nagaland? How about the de-terrorized, ambitious young Nagas living with you all in the metros also? How about also how it is, how it is to live, what it means to live and work in a place that is a frontier and that is the frontier. Really get into the psychological, physical aspects of living in the frontier, especially covering youth, and youth-related issues, I'm saying. So also for Nagaland emerging from conflict, it is very much a cosmopolitan place, more Western than, other parts of India. Also, as demanding an accountable and very active state, which was once completely rejected by the Indian state. So you can see, I'm trying to talk about a very bizarre but very surprisingly emerging assemblance of customary politics and living at the edge of India and South Asia. So I want to ask these questions about, very prolific senior writers that I've been exposed to for the past 2 days now. How we're covering those issues as well and giving the right kind of representation. Beyond, of course, keeping politics and conflicts at heart, but at the same time, experimenting and expanding those issues, touching on those issues. For me as a journalist, I think it's a real shame that things like the Hornbill Festival kind of add to this problem, There is such a wealth of emerging Naga talents. Like, we have lots of artists, we have poets, we have writers, we have musicians, we have activists, we have very talented people coming out. And for the outside world, but it just seems to be like a land of tribals and headhunters and insurgency. So reporting and covering for so many years, I feel like it's just my duty that I also push on and give more impetus to issues like gender issues, climate change issues, environmental, wildlife issues. So my question here was really just to point out that there are so many things that you guys can work on, and if you want help, we are always there for you. And hence, my very purpose of coming here was also that I wanted to network with all of you. And it is such a big opportunity for me, and I want to thank INE, I want to thank NWMI for giving us this chance, this platform. Because I think, for me, the issue of gender justice is just beginning in Nagaland. Even as a working journalist for so many years, I feel we're yet unequipped. We still don't have the skills and the right kind of training and tools which is necessary to tackle this kind of sensitive issue. So, me being here for this day, 3-day session is really helpful. So I'm really grateful, and also I would like to encourage that you invite other journalists from Manipur, from Nagaland, Meghalaya, Mizoram, and include all of us in the fraternities. And that's the point that I would like to discuss.
actually when we were discussing, I'd like to actually come to Jisha next, if it's okay, and I'll just say a bit. Jisha is from Kerala, and she'll talk about Delhi issues there. So that I just wanted, there's actually a connection between the three of us in ways that we don't expect, like Akangchila studied in Bangalore, and I mean there are lots of people from different states of the Northeast living in Bangalore, working there. And so what you mentioned about our blindness to the deterritorialized, the people from the Northeast living among us, and not writing about them living among us. Only once when there was this big event, the exodus after kind of the fake news in much earlier, and a lot of people from the Northeast had to leave because they were afraid of violence. That was the time actually people suddenly saw that there were realized that there were so many people studying, working, and living in Bangalore. And recently I thought, it was always in my mind, and recently again in Assam when the NRC, the National Registry of Citizens was started, and I lived in Bangalore, and I've seen so many of them from Assam live around me, and very quietly working in both working class, also middle class, in both white and blue collar jobs. And there's a shop run in my area, which is actually still a village, although it's in the middle of the most puppy area in Bangalore, and there are department stores there, which are almost all of them run by Malayalis, who also have been able to amass some capital to start shops because they were migrants in the Gulf, and their children now run these shops, and they are employing people from Assam. And so I went, I always buy stuff there, so I hung around and creepily started. It's also weird for suddenly someone who's always buying groceries to go and start talking to them. And they asked me, but I speak Malayalam, so I asked the grocer whether I can talk to them. And I wanted to know because whether they are worried about the NRC at all, whether they had to go back and file the things, how's their family doing. And when I asked them, they said, all of these very young, actually, I don't think anyone was above 22. And all of them are like, no, but what are you doing? I said, I'm just interviewing you. I won't use your name and everything. And they said, no, you go interview them there. Like it's as if I have to cover an issue in Assam, we only have to go to Assam. But although the people who are affected and everything is happening for them, even in a completely different territory. So I completely see, we are also blind to it. And it would be wonderful if we could report if there was a person who could speak their language, who was actually living in the metros, interviews them and writes about their story. So there are no territories at all. So the only connection with Jisha is the Malayali shops. I'm sorry, Jisha, but please do it. There's a lot of migrant issues there. That's sort of why I brought that up.
Thank you.
Jisha, speak in Malayalam and I'll try to translate.
Yes, I'm comfortable with Malayalam. ഞാനിവിടെ ഇരിക്കുന്നത് ഒരു സാധാ ജേർണലിസ്റ്റ്, ഒരു വനിതാ ജേർണലിസ്റ്റ്, ഒരു വനിതാ ജേർണലിസ്റ്റ് യൂണിയന്റെ ഒരു ഭാരവാഹി, സോഷ്യൽ മീഡിയയിൽ സ്ഥിരമായി എഴുതിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്ന ഒരു ജേർണലിസ്റ്റ്, ഒരു സാധാ വനിത എന്നുള്ള പല ആംഗിളിൽ വെച്ചിട്ടാണ് എന്നെ സ്വയം അങ്ങനെയാണ് കൊണ്ടു വെച്ചിട്ടുള്ളത്. എല്ലാവർക്കും അറിയാം, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒട്ടുമിക്ക ആളുകൾക്ക് അറിയാവുന്ന കാര്യമാണ്, കേരള ഇസ് ദ നമ്പർ 1 എന്നാണ് എല്ലാവർക്കും പറയുന്നത്. ഇപ്പോ ഇവിടെ ഇരിക്കുന്ന പല ആളുകളുടെയും പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ നോക്കുമ്പോൾ ഭീകരവാദം, ജനങ്ങളെ രാജ്യദ്രോഹ കുറ്റം ചുമത്തി പലയിടത്തും ജയിലിലടക്കുകയും അങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ, പിന്നെ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ റേപ്പ് ചെയ്യുന്നു, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ വെടിവെച്ച് കൊല്ലുന്നു തുടങ്ങിയ കാര്യങ്ങൾ നോക്കുമ്പോൾ ഞങ്ങൾ കേരളീയർ സ്വർഗത്തിലാണ്. അങ്ങനെയാണ് ഒരു വെപ്പ്, അതൊരു പൊതുബോധം അങ്ങനെയുണ്ട്. കൂടുതൽ പ്രബുദ്ധരായ ജനമാണ്, ഇന്റലക്ച്വൽ പീപ്പിൾ ആണ്, പിന്നെ ഞങ്ങള് എല്ലാ കാര്യങ്ങളിലും എല്ലാവരെക്കാളും കൂടുതൽ ഉയർന്ന രീതിയിൽ ചിന്തിക്കുകയും പ്രവർത്തിക്കുകയും ചെയ്യുന്ന ആളുകളാണ് എന്നൊക്കെയുള്ള ഒരു തെറ്റിദ്ധാരണയുള്ള ഒരു സമൂഹമാണ് കേരളം. പറഞ്ഞു വന്നതാണ്, എന്നെ പോലെയുള്ള ഒരുപാട് വനിതാ ജേർണലിസ്റ്റുകൾ സാധാരണ ഒരു ജീവിതത്തിൽ, ഞാൻ ആദ്യം ഒരു വനിത എന്നുള്ള നിലയ്ക്ക് ജേർണലിസ്റ്റ് ആയ ഒരു കഥ പറയാം. അതായത് ഒട്ടുമിക്ക വനിതാ ജേർണലിസ്റ്റ്
അത്രേ ചെയ്തോട്ടെ, പിന്നെ കണ്ടിന്യൂ.
So she says that she defines herself as an ordinary journalist, a woman journalist, and an ordinary woman in every way. Everyone thinks that Kerala is sort of a paradise, and that when she's listening to all the people here talk about the issues that they write about and deal with, from rapes to communal violence and everyday existence itself being so hard, for Kerala would seem a paradise. At least that is what the perception is. But there are a lot, and that is what she wants to talk about. And now, beyond the perception, there is a truth.
ഒട്ടുമിക്ക വനിതാ ജേർണലിസ്റ്റുകളും വന്നിട്ടുള്ളത് ഒരു ചെറിയ ശതമാനം ഒഴിച്ച് ബാക്കി എല്ലാവരും വന്നിട്ടുള്ളത് സാധാ ജീവിതത്തിൽ നിന്നാണ്. അതായത് അടിച്ചമർത്തപ്പെട്ട ആളുകളുടെ മക്കൾ, പുറത്തേക്ക് ഇറങ്ങാൻ ബുദ്ധിമുട്ടുള്ള ആളുകൾ, രാത്രിയിൽ യാത്ര ചെയ്യാൻ ബുദ്ധിമുട്ടുള്ള ആളുകൾ, ഉറക്കെ സംസാരിച്ചാൽ, ഉറക്കെ ചിരിച്ചാൽ, ഒരു അഭിപ്രായം ഉറക്കെ പറഞ്ഞാൽ എല്ലാം നിയന്ത്രണങ്ങൾ നേരിടുന്ന ഒരു സമൂഹത്തിൽ നിന്നുള്ള കുട്ടികളാണ് കൂടുതലും വനിതാ ജേർണലിസ്റ്റുകളായി വന്നിട്ടുള്ളത്. അപ്പൊ ഈ വനിതാ ജേർണലിസ്റ്റുകൾ നേരിടുന്ന ഒരുപാട് പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ ഞങ്ങളിപ്പോ കൈകാര്യം ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ്. അങ്ങനെ പറഞ്ഞു വരുന്ന സമയത്ത് സോറി, ഞാൻ എഴുതിട്ട് സംസാരിച്ചു. താങ്ക് യു. ഇപ്പം വനിതകൾ നേരിടുന്ന പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ ഒരുപാട് കേരളത്തിലുണ്ട്. വനിതാ ജേർണലിസ്റ്റുകൾ ആളുകളുടെ എണ്ണം വളരെ കുറവാണ് ഡെസ്കുകളിലൊക്കെ വരുന്ന സമയത്ത്. അപ്പൊ ഇപ്പൊ ഏറ്റവും കൂടുതൽ വലിയ പ്രശ്നം ഞങ്ങൾ നേരിടുന്ന പ്രശ്നം ശബരിമല വിഷയവുമായി ബന്ധപ്പെട്ട് ഉണ്ടാകുന്ന കുറെ കാര്യങ്ങൾ ഇപ്പൊ നടന്നുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ്. നിങ്ങൾക്ക് അറിയാം, സ്ത്രീകളെ ആർത്തവത്തിന്റെ പേരിൽ തടഞ്ഞു നിർത്തുന്ന ഒരു ഇഷ്യൂ ഉണ്ടായിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ്. ഇപ്പൊ ഇവിടെ ഇരിക്കുന്ന സരിത ചേച്ചി, പിന്നെ അതുപോലെ ഒരു മെയിൻ സ്ട്രീം ഇവിടെ ഹിന്ദി ചാനലുകളിൽ നിന്ന്, ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് ചാനലുകളിൽ നിന്ന് വന്നിട്ടുള്ള ഒരുപാട് വനിതാ ജേർണലിസ്റ്റുകളെ തല്ലുന്നു, ചവിട്ടുന്നു, അവരുടെ ജാതി മതം പറഞ്ഞുകൊണ്ട് എന്തിനിവിടെ വന്നു എന്നൊക്കെ പറഞ്ഞുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്ന ഒരു വലിയ ഇഷ്യൂ നടന്നുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ് കേരളത്തില്.
So she says that there are most of the women journalists in Kerala are from very ordinary backgrounds. People who women who can't really go out at night, who worry about that. Women who speak softly and don't raise their voice. Women who have a lot of restrictions at home, and so most of those are the women who have actually become journalists in Kerala. And now it seems like they itself have become the center of so much attack. And she's giving the example of the Shabrimala case, where women reporters like Sarita and like many others here. Sarita is here sitting in front, and I'll ask her to speak just after. And in the name of tradition, they are held back, and in the name of periods and things, they are being held back, abused. Their caste is abused. Their whole ilk is just abused as people who shouldn't be getting in there.
Okay. അപ്പൊ നമ്മള് ഈ വിഷയത്തിലേക്ക് കടന്നു വരികയാണെങ്കിൽ, ഇപ്പൊ നമ്മുടെ കൂടെയുള്ള ജേർണലിസ്റ്റുകൾ മൊത്തം എല്ലാ ആളുകളും നമ്മുടെ അടുത്ത് പറയും നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ഫുൾ സപ്പോർട്ടാണ്, ഞങ്ങൾ നിങ്ങളുടെ കൂടെയുണ്ട് എന്നൊക്കെ പറഞ്ഞാലും അവര് ഉള്ളിൽ വിചാരിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നത് എന്താ വെച്ചിട്ടുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ, എന്തിനാണ് സ്ത്രീകൾ പ്രശ്നം ഉണ്ടാക്കാൻ പോകുന്നത്? നമ്മുടെ കൂടെയുള്ള ജേർണലിസ്റ്റുകൾ തന്നെ കുറെ സ്ത്രീകളും അത്തരത്തിലെ കരുതുന്നവരുണ്ട്. നിങ്ങൾ എന്തിനാണ് പോകുന്നത്? അവരുടെ ആചാരം അതാണെങ്കിൽ നിങ്ങൾ ജേർണലിസ്റ്റുകൾ, നിങ്ങൾ പറയുന്നു നിങ്ങളുടെ ജോലിയാണ് ചെയ്യുന്നത് എന്ന്, പക്ഷെ എന്തിനാണ് നിങ്ങൾ അവിടെ പോകുന്നത് എന്ന് പറയുന്ന വനിതാ ജേർണലിസ്റ്റുകൾ അടക്കമുള്ള ഒരു വലിയ സമൂഹം ജേർണലിസ്റ്റുകളുടെ ഉള്ളിൽ നിന്നുകൊണ്ടാണ് ഞങ്ങൾ കുറഞ്ഞൊരു സമൂഹം വർക്ക് ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നത്. അപ്പം ആർത്തവം തുടങ്ങിയ ആർത്തവത്തിന്റെ പേരിൽ തടഞ്ഞു നിർത്തുന്നു, ആചാരത്തിന്റെ പേരിൽ തടഞ്ഞു നിർത്തുന്നു എന്ന് പറയുന്ന അതേ ഒരു വലിയ ഗ്രൂപ്പിന്റെ പ്രൊട്ടസ്റ്റ് ചെയ്യേണ്ട ആളുകളാണ് നമ്മൾ ജേർണലിസ്റ്റുകൾ. പക്ഷെ അതിന്റെ അകത്ത് ഇതുപോലെയുള്ള പിന്തിരിപ്പൻ നയമുള്ള ആളുകളുണ്ട്. ഇപ്പൊ ജേർണലിസ്റ്റ് സമൂഹത്തിന്റെ ഒരേ ഒരു യൂണിയൻ എന്ന് അവകാശപ്പെടുന്ന കേരള വർക്കിംഗ് ജേർണലിസ്റ്റ് യൂണിയന്റെ എക്സിക്യൂട്ടീവ് മെമ്പറാണ് ഞാൻ. അതിന്റെ അകത്ത് ഈ സരിത ചേച്ചിയെ ബസ്സിൽ നിന്ന് ഇറക്കി ചവിട്ടി ഹോസ്പിറ്റലിൽ ചെയ്ത സമയത്ത് ഒരു സ്റ്റേറ്റ്മെന്റ് ഇറക്കാൻ പോലും യൂണിയൻ തയ്യാറായില്ല. സമയം ഒരുപാട് എടുത്തു. നാഷണൽ മീഡിയയിൽ നിന്ന് ആളുകൾ വന്നു, അവർക്ക് ഉപദ്രവം ഉണ്ടായി, അത് നാഷണൽ മീഡിയയിൽ വലിയ വാർത്തയായി. അപ്പോഴാണ് നമ്മുടെ ആളുകൾ ഒന്ന് ചൂടായി വരുന്നത്. എന്നിട്ട് ഞാൻ വിളിച്ചിട്ട് പ്രസിഡന്റിനോട് പറയാണ്, പ്രസിഡന്റ് ഇങ്ങനെ സംഭവങ്ങളുണ്ട്, നിങ്ങൾ സ്റ്റേറ്റ്മെന്റ് എങ്കിലും ഇറക്കണം, അവർക്ക് വേണ്ട ആരോഗ്യ പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾക്കുള്ള പ്രതിവിധി ചെയ്യണം എന്നൊക്കെ പറയുമ്പോൾ അതൊക്കെ സാമട്ടിൽ വിടുന്ന ഒരു യൂണിയനും തുടങ്ങിയ ആളുകളാണ് നമ്മുടെ കയ്യിലുള്ളത്. അപ്പം ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞു വരുന്നത് ഇതാണ്, ജേർണലിസ്റ്റ് ആയിട്ട് പോലും ഒരു സ്ത്രീക്ക് രക്ഷയില്ല. പൊതുബോധം അവിടെ എല്ലാവരും സുഖമായിട്ട് കഴിയാവുന്നതാണ്, പക്ഷെ അങ്ങനെയല്ല എന്നാണ് ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞു വരുന്നത്. അവിടെ തോട്ടികളുടെ വിഷയങ്ങളുണ്ട്, പിന്നെ മത്സ്യത്തൊഴിലാളികളുടെ പ്രശ്നങ്ങളുണ്ട്, ട്രൈബൽസിന്റെ പ്രശ്നങ്ങളുണ്ട്. ഇപ്പൊ ഞാൻ തന്നെ ഏറ്റെടുത്തിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു പ്രശ്നമായിരുന്നു മത്സ്യത്തൊഴിലാളികളുടെ വിഷയം.
I'll just translate that what you said to me. So I'm thanks. I got distracted by your message, so I'm just trying my best. So she says that in the name of tradition and menstruation, a lot of people are protesting outside the temple itself, and inside that there are groups of people that journalists themselves who are in sort of support or tacit support of that kind of if not attack, at least the idea that these women should not be coming. And she says that there's only one union in Kerala. What is the name again?
Kerala Union of Working Journalists.
Kerala Union of Working Journalists, and she's an executive member there. And when Sarita, who actually I think she'll speak tomorrow, not today, Sarita, when she was removed from the bus, stamped and attacked by these mobs, at that time the union, this Kerala Journalists Union, did not even put out one statement. And then after some time, the national media came. In a little while, many of them reported. Jisha then called the president of that journalist union and said, "At least now, can you please put out a statement? Things are really getting heated up." And did they give a statement?
Yes.
After that, they did. So, I mean, this is how much it takes before someone takes notice of something, when actually the women journalists themselves are becoming part of the news as women in a place where women are not being allowed to go inside. Have I missed something?
No, I think the only thing she said is, even as women journalists, we don't have the power on the narrative, and we are very, very vulnerable. Like any other woman.
Yeah, like any other. And then Jisha started about how there are lots of issues that should be covered. For example, the fish workers issues.
Okay. മത്സ്യത്തൊഴിലാളികളുടെ വിഷയം ഞാൻ കൈകാര്യം ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടിരുന്നു. ഇപ്പൊ മത്സ്യത്തൊഴിലാളികൾ അറിയപ്പെടുന്നത് കേരളത്തിന്റെ സൈന്യം എന്നാണ്. പക്ഷെ അതിനു മുമ്പ് അവരെ ആരും കണക്ക് കൂട്ടിയിരുന്നില്ല. ഇപ്പൊ ചുരുക്കത്തിൽ പറഞ്ഞു കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ഓക്കി എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ഒരു ചുഴലിക്കാറ്റ് ആഞ്ഞടിച്ച സമയത്ത് അവരടുത്ത് ഞങ്ങൾ പൊതുസമൂഹം ഇൻക്ലൂഡിങ് ജേർണലിസ്റ്റുകൾ പറഞ്ഞുകൊണ്ടിരുന്നത്, അവർക്ക് അങ്ങനെ ആള് പോയാലൊന്നും വിഷമില്ല, അവർക്ക് ആകെ വേണ്ടത് സർക്കാരിന്റെ നഷ്ടപരിഹാര തുകയാണ്. അപ്പൊ അതിനു വേണ്ടിയിട്ടുള്ള അടവുകളാണ് അവർ ചെയ്യുന്നത്. സർക്കാർ പറഞ്ഞാൽ അനുസരിക്കില്ല, പൊതുജനം പറഞ്ഞാൽ അനുസരിക്കില്ല, പറയുന്ന നിർദ്ദേശങ്ങൾ അവർ അനുസരിക്കില്ല, അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് അവരുടെ ആളുകൾ പോയതെന്നാണ്. അപ്പൊ അതേ ആളുകളുടെ അടുത്തുനിന്ന് അതേ ആളുകൾ ഒരു വലിയൊരു പ്രളയം കേരളത്തിന് നേരിട്ടപ്പോ സൈന്യം വന്ന് 25,000 പേരെ രക്ഷിച്ചു. അവർക്ക് എല്ലാ ഫുൾ ഫ്ലഡ്ജ്ഡ് അവരുടെ എല്ലാ സൗകര്യങ്ങളും കൂടി വന്നിട്ടാണ് 25,000 പേരെ രക്ഷപ്പെടുത്തിയത്. പക്ഷെ ഈ മത്സ്യത്തൊഴിലാളികളുടെ അവരുടെ സാധാ ബോട്ടുകളില് ചെറിയ തോണികളിലെല്ലാം ഒരു സുരക്ഷാ ക്രമീകരണങ്ങളില്ലാതെ വന്ന് 65,000-ലധികം പേരെ രക്ഷപ്പെടുത്തി. അപ്പോ മലയാളികൾക്ക് മനസ്സിലായി, ഇവരെ നമ്മളെ രക്ഷിച്ചു, നമ്മൾ അത് നോക്കിയ സമയത്ത് ചെയ്തത് ശരിയല്ല. അപ്പൊ ഇതിനു മുമ്പ് ഈ ഓക്കിക്ക് മുമ്പും കുറെ വർഷങ്ങളായി മത്സ്യത്തൊഴിലാളികളുടെ ഈ വിഷയം കൈകാര്യം ചെയ്യുന്ന ആളുകൾ എന്ന നിലയ്ക്ക് അവരനുഭവിക്കുന്ന പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ, അവർ പറയുന്ന പൊതുസമൂഹം ഞങ്ങൾ ഒഴിവാക്കുന്നു എന്ന് പറയുന്ന തരത്തിലുള്ള പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ കേരളത്തിലെ മത്സ്യത്തൊഴിലാളികളായാലും ട്രൈബൽസ് ആയാലും പിന്നെ തോട്ടികളായിട്ട് ഇപ്പൊ നമ്മൾ പറയും വലിയ സമൂഹമാണ്, അവിടെ അങ്ങനെ തോട്ടികളൊന്നും ഇല്ലാന്ന്. പക്ഷെ മാൻഹോളിൽ ഇറങ്ങി വർക്ക് ചെയ്യുന്നവരാണെങ്കിലും എല്ലാം അവിടെ പ്രശ്നങ്ങളുണ്ട്. ഇനി പീരീഡ്സിന്റെ സമയത്ത് പുറത്താക്കുന്ന വിഷയങ്ങൾ സംബന്ധിച്ച് ആരോഗ്യമുള്ള ആളുകൾ ഒരുപാട് എഴുതിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. സ്ത്രീകളെ പുറത്തു നിർത്തുന്നതും സ്ത്രീകള് വെളിപ്പുരകളിൽ താമസിക്കുന്നതും അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അവർക്ക് മറ്റുള്ളവരെ തൊടാൻ സമ്മതിക്കാത്തതും പഠിക്കാൻ സമ്മതിക്കാത്തുള്ള വിഷയങ്ങൾ എഴുതിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. അത്തരത്തിൽ കേരളത്തിന് പുറത്ത് വലിയ തോതിൽ നടക്കുന്ന പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ, മെയിൻ സ്ട്രീം റിപ്പോർട്ട് ചെയ്യുന്ന പ്രശ്നങ്ങളെല്ലാം കേരളത്തിന്റെ അകത്തുണ്ട്. വനിതാ
Saying that there are a lot of issues that one does not even think exist in Kerala because it's supposed to be a paradise, that do exist. The example that she gave was the fish workers and fishermen in Kerala who suddenly are now called as Kerala's army and celebrated because during the floods they went out and rescued 65,000 people in small boats, no equipment, no protection, no safety, and they did it all on their own. But during the Ukai cyclone, that when they did face a lot of losses and lives were lost as fishermen in sea, people just said that all they want is just compensation and some other boats, and nobody really cared about what they had faced in a similar disaster situation. So she says that similarly, these now they may be heroes, but for such a long time they were just seen, they were not even visible. There similarly, the tribal communities, they are also facing situation. People think that manhole workers don't exist in Kerala. They do. Untouchability exists, and especially women are specifically vulnerable to certain practices that still exist in Kerala. Okay. Jisha, 1 moment.
Okay. പിന്നെ അപ്പോ അത്തരം പ്രശ്നങ്ങളെല്ലാം കേരളത്തിലുണ്ട് എന്നിരിക്കുകയാണ്. ഞങ്ങൾ സ്ത്രീ ഇപ്പൊ ഞാൻ ഇതിൽ ഇവിടെ കുറെ മലയാളി സുഹൃത്തുക്കളുണ്ട്. അവർക്ക് ഞാനിങ്ങനെ വിട്ടുവിട്ട് ഒക്കെ പറയുന്നത് ക്ഷമിക്കുക എന്നാലും പറയാണ്. അപ്പൊ ഞങ്ങള് വനിതാ ജേർണലിസ്റ്റുകൾ നേരിടുന്ന വലിയ പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ വരുന്നത് വെച്ചാൽ സ്ത്രീ ആയതുകൊണ്ട് ലൈംഗിക അപവാദങ്ങൾ നേരിടാറുണ്ട്. വനിതാ ജേർണലിസ്റ്റുകൾ കാര്യം പറയാനുള്ളത് രാത്രിയാത്ര സൗകര്യം ഏർപ്പാടാക്കാത്തതിനാല് ആ ആവശ്യം നമ്മൾ ആവശ്യപ്പെടുന്ന സമയത്ത് പ്രതികാര നടപടികൾക്ക് വിധേയരാകും. നിയമപരമായ കൃഷി സൗകര്യം തരില്ല. കുഞ്ഞിനെ മുളികെട്ടാൻ വീട്ടിൽ പോകുന്നത് ചൂണ്ടിക്കാട്ടിയിട്ട് ഞങ്ങള് കറങ്ങാനാണ് പോകുന്നതെന്ന് പറയും. അങ്ങനെ പരസ്യ ആക്ഷേപം കേൾക്കും. പിന്നെ മേലുദ്യോഗസ്ഥർ സഹപ്രവർത്തകരൊക്കെ നമ്മളെ സെക്സിസ്റ്റ് കമന്റുകൾ പറഞ്ഞിട്ട് അടിച്ചിരുത്തും. ഇപ്പൊ വനിതാ ജേർണലിസ്റ്റുകൾ മത്സരിക്കാൻ യൂണിയനിലേക്ക് വന്ന സമയത്ത് പറഞ്ഞത് നിങ്ങൾ സ്ത്രീകളായതുകൊണ്ടാണ് വിജയിച്ചത്. അതായത് സ്ത്രീകളായതുകൊണ്ട് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ഡബിൾ മീനിങ് ആണ് പറയുന്നത്. നിങ്ങൾ കൂടെ കിടന്നിട്ടാണെങ്കിലും അല്ലെങ്കിൽ തൊടാൻ സമ്മതിച്ചിട്ടാണെങ്കിലും നിങ്ങൾ പിന്നെ അങ്ങനെയാണ്, അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് നിങ്ങൾ വിജയിച്ചത്. അല്ലാണ്ട് നിങ്ങളുടെ കയ്യിൽ കഴിവൊന്നും ഉണ്ടായിട്ടല്ല നിങ്ങൾ വിജയിച്ചത്. പിന്നെ ഇപ്പൊ ഇവിടെ പലരും പേര് പറയാൻ വിമുഖത കാണിച്ച ഒരു പേരുണ്ട്, ഗൗരിദാസ് നായർ. അദ്ദേഹം വലിയ ജേർണലിസ്റ്റ് ആണ്, സ്ത്രീകളുടെ ഉന്നമനത്തിന് വേണ്ടി പ്രവർത്തിക്കുന്ന ആളാണ്. പിന്നെ സ്ത്രീകൾ ശാക്തീകരണത്തിന് വേണ്ടി ഘോരഘോരം പ്രസംഗിക്കുന്ന ആളാണ്. അപ്പൊ അദ്ദേഹം പിന്നെ ഒരു മീറ്റ് വിഭാഗത്തിൽ പെട്ട സമയത്ത് അത് വായിച്ചിട്ട് നമ്മുടെ കൂടെയുള്ള ജേർണലിസ്റ്റുകൾ ഒരു അക്ഷരം പോലും മിണ്ടില്ല എന്നുള്ളത് മാത്രമല്ല, ഈ പറഞ്ഞ സ്ത്രീകളെയൊക്കെ അടച്ചാക്ഷേപിക്കും. ഇപ്പൊ പറഞ്ഞ ആളുകളൊക്കെ ഇവിടെ ഉണ്ട്. ഈ മീറ്റ് വിഭാഗത്തിലെ മീറ്റു ബുദ്ധിമുട്ടുകൾ ഈ പിന്നെ ഉണ്ടായ അനുഭവങ്ങൾ പറഞ്ഞ ആളുകളൊക്കെ ഉണ്ട്. അവരുടെ അടുത്തൊക്കെ കൂട്ടിയിട്ട് ഞാൻ പറയുന്നത് അവരിനൊക്കെ ആക്ഷേപിച്ച തരത്തിലാണ് സംസാരം ഉണ്ടായത്. ഒരു പ്രസ്താവന ഇറക്കുന്നതിനോ മീറ്റിങ്ങുകളിലേക്ക് കാര്യം ചർച്ച ചെയ്യുന്നതിനോ ഒന്നും നമ്മുടെ യൂണിയൻ തയ്യാറായില്ല. അപ്പൊ അങ്ങനെയുള്ള സമയത്താണ് ഞങ്ങള് ചില പിന്നെ റിപ്പോർട്ട് ചെയ്യുന്ന സമയത്ത് ജെൻഡർ ഇഷ്യൂ കൈകാര്യം സമയത്ത് സ്ത്രീകളെ അടച്ചാക്ഷേപിക്കുക. അവരാണ് ഇതെല്ലാം.
Jisha, maybe we'll actually, I'm really sorry, we'll have to stop. There are 3 more people to speak. Quick translation, China.
Actually, Jisha was talking about the issues that women journalists face in particular. Like, for example, she was talking about when the women journalists, especially feeding mothers when they go to feed the young infants, that they have to face the allegation that they are going out to roam around, and actually they don't need to go. And also like all those juicy stories of sexual, the women being loose women, that kind of stories are always there about the journalists, women journalists. And also like when this Me Too, all this Me Too happened in Kerala, and especially one person who was the chief of the Hindu in Kerala, Mr. Gauridas Nair, when that issue came out, this journalist union they did literally nothing. Like they were not ready to come out with any statement or nothing. So that kind of a reluctance which is very high in Kerala, it's very unfriendly to women. That's the crux of the thing. It's fine with it. Okay.
Thank you, Shaina. I'll go to Kavin now. Kavin, I'm really sorry. All the 3 who are left hate me right now, but please finish in like 3 minutes. And because also, maybe you get only 1.5 translations.
I have an experience of working in Anjulika FM and trying it. Okay. Okay, எல்லாமே சுருக்கமாவே சொல்றேன். என்னோட எக்ஸ்பீரியன்ஸ்லேருந்து இங்க நடக்கிற பிரச்சனைகளை சொல்லலாம் அப்படின்னு நினைக்கிறேன். ஃபர்ஸ்ட் திங், நம்ம கொடுத்துருக்க லிஸ்ட்ல விட்டு போனது ரெஃப்யூஜிஸ். அதாவது ஸ்ரீலங்கன் ரெஃப்யூஜி கேம்புக்கு வந்து அங்க ரிப்போர்ட்டிங்காக போனபோது அது எப்பவுமே 2 branch police will be there. They will be watching always. So you can't go. ஸோ அங்க என்ன பண்ணேன்னா, அங்க உள்ள ஒருத்தர் வந்து நான் வந்து I am from ஈழம் told நான் இங்க என்னோட ரிலேட்டிவ், ஸோ நான் வந்து உங்களை அழைச்சிட்டு போறேன் அப்படின்னு சொல்லி உங்களை அழைச்சிட்டு போறாரு. நோ கேமரா இஸ் அலவுட். ஸோ என்னோட எம்பி வந்து அப்போ ஒரு சின்ன மொபைல் மாதிரி ஒரு கேமரா இருக்கும். அது இப்படி வச்சிருந்தோம்னா நம்ம மொபைல் பார்க்குற மாதிரி தான் இருக்கும், யாருக்கும் ஒரு கேமரான்னு தெரியாது. அதை எடுத்துட்டு போய் பயங்கர டென்ஷன். அது உள்ள யாரும் பார்த்துப்பாங்க, கியூ பிரான்ச்ல மாட்டாம வெளில வரணுன்றது பயங்கரமான டென்ஷனா இருந்துச்சு. எதுக்காக கவர்மெண்ட் இவ்வளோ அது ஒரு க்ளோஸ்டு கம்யூனிட்டியா அந்த ரெஃப்யூஜி கேம்ப் வச்சிருக்காங்கன்றது எனக்கு நிஜமாலுமே புரியல. தமிழ்நாட்டோட எந்த ரெஃப்யூஜி கேம்ப்குள்ளேயும் நம்ம உள்ள நுழைஞ்சு அவ்வளோ ஈஸியா பார்த்துட முடியாது. இது ஒரு முக்கியமான பிரச்சனை ஃபார் ரிப்போர்ட்டர்ஸ். நெக்ஸ்ட் வந்து இப்போ ஒரு ரோ சொல்லுங்க.
So she's talking about one of the things among the list of things we've mentioned are not covered. We left out is the issue of refugees, and she's talking particularly about Sri Lankan refugees, most of them Sri Lankan Tamil, who are based in camps and across Tamil Nadu and some other states in India as well. And in Tamil Nadu, there is a branch of police called the Q branch. Look at how cool that my aside. Look at the cool name. And no one can, and they're really strict, both for people coming from outside, like reporters, and for them to come inside, go out and speak to outsiders. And she's saying one of the people who went inside said, he said that he's from he's from Sri Lanka, the north of Sri Lanka, and that he said that and he went in. And she says one of the editors in her office took a small camera and went in, and it was cameras are not allowed, so it was really scary, and the moment was so tense. And she asks, why do a group of refugees have to be kept in such a scary, closed, surveillance-ridden environment, and so isolated from people, and they're simply refugees living here, political refugees. And she says this is an issue for reporters also, and as a rights issue as well.
Okay, the next one, when you talk about the religious things, Isha Yoga, I think, that's Jackie Vasudev. Environmental issue. Western Ghats fullaவே வந்து all of the religious institutions வந்து full-ஆ encroachment பண்ணி வச்சிருக்காங்க. Reserved forestல encroachment இருக்கு. So I did a story on that when I was in India today. So I have to take different appearances for me to go inside those areas. That's like a military area actually. They won't allow journalists except for their camps. நான் எப்படி உள்ள போனேன் அப்படின்னா, இந்த மாதா மிருதானந்தமயி மடம் ஒன்று இருக்காங்க நியர் த கேரளா பார்டர். நான் ஃபாரஸ்ட் டிபார்ட்மெண்டோட ஹெல்ப் வாங்கிட்டு அவங்களோட கார்லயே அவங்களோட ஜீப்லயே அவங்க வந்து இவங்க அம்மா ஃபாரஸ்ட் ஆபீசர் வராங்க அப்படின்னு சொல்லி டிரைவர் சொல்றாரு, அவங்க நிறுத்திட்டாங்க. அப்படி ஹெல்ப் வாங்கிட்டா உள்ள போய் அவங்க என்ன பண்றாங்க, எவ்வளவு ரிசர்வ்டு ஃபாரஸ்ட்குள்ள என்க்ரோச்மெண்ட் இருக்குன்றத பார்க்க முடிஞ்சது, அதை பத்தி ஸ்டோரி பண்ண முடிஞ்சது. அட் த சேம் டைம் ஈஷா யோகாவோட ஸ்டோரியும் சேர்ந்து எல்லாமே ஒரு காருண்யா, ஈஷா யோகா, ஆல் ரிலிஜன்ஸ் எல்லாமே என்க்ரோச்மெண்ட் தான். அந்த ஸ்டோரி வெளிவந்தப்போ அது தமிழ், மலையாளம் அண்ட் தெலுங்கு மூணுலயும் வந்தது. ஸோ கேரளா ஹஸ் லாட் ஆஃப் டிவோட்டிஸ் ஃபார் திஸ் ஈஷா யோகா. அப்போ அவங்களுக்கு ஆட்டோமேட்டிக்கா என்னன்னா 3 மொழியிலையும் வந்தோடனே அவங்களுக்கு டிவோட்டிஸ் சேர்ந்து நிறைய என்கொயரிஸ் எல்லாம் வர ஆரம்பிச்சோடனே அவங்களுக்கு டிஃபர்மேஷன் மாதிரி ரொம்ப ஃபீல் பண்ணி நேரா எங்க டெல்லி வந்துட்டாங்க. டெல்லி வந்து அருண்பூரியை வந்து பார்த்துட்டு அவர்கிட்டே வந்து இந்த மாதிரி வந்து நாங்க we are planning for English version. அது வந்து நெக்ஸ்ட் வீக்ல வர இருக்கு, நாங்க டிரான்ஸ்லேட் பண்ணி இங்கிலீஷ்ல வர போகுதுன்னு போது அவங்களுக்கு எப்படி தெரிஞ்சதுன்னு தெரியல. நேரா போய் இங்க வந்து டெல்லி பீப்புளை பார்த்து அதை ஸ்டாப் பண்ணிட்டு அந்த மக்கள் வந்து அங்க என்ன பாக்குறதுக்காக எங்க ஆபீஸ்க்கு வராங்க. கிட்டத்தட்ட அது ஒரு த்ரெட்டனிங். ஒரு 5-6 பேர் அந்த ஆரஞ்சு ட்ரெஸ்ஸஸ்ல வந்துட்டு நாங்க வந்து அந்த எழுதுனவங்களை பார்க்கணும் அப்படின்னு வந்து கேட்டோம். ராஜீவ் பிஐ, I was my managing editor at the time. He never allowed them to see me. என்ன பேசுறதுனால என்கிட்ட பேசுங்க அப்படின்னு சொன்னாலும் கூப்பிட்டு வந்து இல்ல அவங்க பார்க்கணும், நாங்க நிறைய நல்ல விஷயங்கள் பண்றோம், அதெல்லாம் எழுதாம நீங்க ஏன் எங்களை பத்தி இப்படி எழுதுறீங்க, நீங்க வந்து அடுத்த இஷ்யூல வந்து எங்களை பத்தி நாங்க நல்லதெல்லாம் என்னென்ன பண்ணோம், இங்க ட்ரீ பிளான் பண்ணோம், அதெல்லாம் நீங்க எழுதணும், லட்சம் மரங்கள் நட்டுருக்கோம், அதெல்லாம் எழுதணும். அவர் கேட்டாரு, இருக்கிற மரங்கள் எல்லாம் முடிங்கிட்டு நீங்க ஃபாரஸ்ட்ல போய் அழிச்சிட்டு பில்டிங் கட்டிட்டு நீங்க மரம் எங்க போய் நட்டீங்க அப்படின்னு அவர் திரும்ப கேட்கவும் அவங்களுக்கு வந்து இதை எப்படி டீல் பண்றதுன்னு தெரியல. ஏன்னா அவர் வந்து என்ன பார்க்கவே விடல, அவரே பேசி டீல் பண்ணி அனுப்பிச்சிட்டாரு. இது ஒரு விஷயம்.
So she says that a lot of religious institutions exist. And for example, the Isha Foundation, which is run by Jaggi Vasudev in Coimbatore, and she says that there is a lot of. She had done a story on the environment violations that they've done, especially encroachment of a reserved forest. And she did a story on it for which she had to be in disguise. And the stories, she says that there's an Mata Amritanandamayi Mutt nearby, who is another religious leader. And so she went in with the forest department vehicle, and there the guards of the Isha Foundation said, oh, they thought that we just said Mata coming, and They said, oh yes, allow her. And so she went in, and she found that there was massive encroachment and horrible violations. And she wrote this story and it came out, I think, India Today, in 3 languages, in Tamil, Telugu, and Malayalam. And so a lot of devotees of these gurus came to know about it, and they must have made many calls. And so the foundation felt like it was some sort of defamation. The article was soon to come out in English in India Today, but the members of that foundation came to Delhi and met Arun Puri, and then it was stopped. So then after that, not just satisfied with that, some 4 or 5 people from the foundation came to her office in Chennai and insisted on meeting her. She says she thanks the MD, managing director at the time, who did not allow them to see her. And they basically asked him, so, see, we're doing so many good things, why aren't you writing about that? We've planted 1 lakh trees, why aren't you writing about that? So the managing director said that, so after you cut down lots of trees, then you plant some trees, you expect us to write about that. Kavin, 30 seconds.
30 seconds. 1 minute anyway.
Then everybody will be hungry then.
Okay. So there are a lot of instances. Okay, I'm stopping myself with only one. Everybody knows that the PMK people, when I was reporting about the Ilavarasan's issue, அப்போ என்ன ஆச்சுன்னா அது ஒரு பத்தி எரிஞ்ச பிரச்சனை தமிழ்நாட்டுல. ரொம்ப தலித்ஸ் வெர்சஸ் நான் தலித்ஸ் பயங்கரமா இப்போ வரைக்கும் அதோடைய பிரச்சனை தான் நிறைய ஹானர் ஃபீலிங்ல கொண்டு போய் விட்டு குணவதி பேசின மாதிரி. இப்போ என்ன ஆச்சுன்னா அந்த டைத்துல அதை பத்தி ரிப்போர்ட் பண்ணதுக்காக நிறைய த்ரெட்ஸ், ஆன்லைன் த்ரெட்ஸ், ஃபோன் த்ரெட்ஸ் இப்படி வந்துட்டே இருந்தது. அப்போ ரொம்ப முக்கியமான ஒரு விஷயம் தான், இப்போ முகம் தெரியாத யாரோ ஒருத்தவங்க சோசியல் மீடியால ஏதாவது எழுதுறது அதெல்லாம் கூட ஓகே. பட் renowned மினிஸ்டர் அன்புமணி ராமதாஸ் அவர் இந்த ஸ்டோரிஸ் எல்லாம் பார்த்துட்டு எங்க எடிட்டருக்கு ஃபோன் பண்ணி கேட்குறாங்க, நீங்க எப்பவுமே எங்களை பத்தி தப்பா போர்ட்ரேட் பண்றீங்க, அதுவும் பர்டிகுலரா அந்த கவின் மலர்னு ஒருத்தவங்க எழுதுறாங்க, அவங்க ரொம்ப மோசமா எழுதுறாங்க. நான் ஒண்ணு பண்றேன், அவங்க எடிட்டோரியல் மீட்டிங்க்கு நான் வரேன், அதை நான் உட்காந்து பேசுறேன் அவங்களுக்கெல்லாம் அப்படின்னு சொல்லி கேட்கவும், இவருக்கு எங்க எடிட்டருக்கு உண்மையில என்ன பண்றதுன்னு தெரியல. he seek the help of managing editor and he told ஒன்றும் பிரச்சனை இல்லை, அவர் வரணுமா, ஓகே ரைட் வர சொல்லுங்க, பட் பிஃபோர் தட் அவர் முறைப்படி அப்ளை பண்ணி இன்டர்வியூ அட்டன் பண்ணி முடிச்சுட்டு வரலாம் அப்படின்னு அவர் ஒரு பதில் சொன்னார். இன்னொரு தடவை ஃபோன் பண்ணாருன்னா அவருக்கு இந்த பதில் சொல்லுங்க. எனக்கு தெரிஞ்சு இப்படி ஒரு நச்சுன்னு இப்படி ஒரு பதில் ஒரு மினிஸ்டரா இருக்கக்கூடிய ஒருத்தர்கிட்ட யாரும் சொல்லுவாங்களான்னு தெரியல. பட் மை எடிட்டர் டிட் ஜஸ்ட் ஃபார் மீ. அது உண்மையிலேயே எனக்கு ரொம்ப அது ஒரு இன்ஸ்டிடியூஷனா ஒரு ஆபீஸா அது என் கூட இருந்ததுன்றது எனக்கு ரொம்ப சந்தோஷமான ஒரு விஷயமாக இருந்தது. எப்படின்னா ஒரு ரைட்டிங்கை அவங்களால தாண்டிக்கவே முடியல. அவங்க பண்ண கேஸ்ட் வைலன்ஸை பத்தி எழுதும்போது 3 ஊரை அடிச்சாங்க தர்மபுரியில, தலித் வில்லேஜஸ். அதை பத்தி எழுதும்போது அவங்களுக்கு அவ்வளவு கோவம் வருது. இன்னும் சொல்ல போனா எனக்கு வேலையை விட்டு தூக்கணும் அப்படின்லாம் இன்னொரு ஜேர்னலிஸ்ட வச்செல்லாம் ட்ரை பண்ணாங்க ரொம்ப. என்னோட பர்சனல் எக்ஸ்பீரியன்ஸ்ல இருந்து இதை பேசுறதுனால நான் இதெல்லாம் இங்க சொல்ல வேண்டியிருக்கு. நான் நேற்று சொன்னேன் இல்லையா, இதுக்காக தான் NWMI-ல எனக்கு இந்த ஆன்லைன் த்ரெட்ஸ்க்காக தான் ஸ்டேட்மெண்ட் வந்தது. அதுக்கு பின்னாடி இது மாதிரி இன்னும் நிறைய இருக்கு, பட் நான் இதோட முடிச்சுக்கிறேன்.
So she mentioned this particular case which she wrote about powerfully, which was the killing of a Dalit boy for an intercaste marriage. And the main mob, this is my context I'm giving. So the main party that was involved in attacking and causing this violence and burning 3 villages, Dalit villages, was the party of Anbumani Ramdas, who was the health minister. But his party, called the PMK, is just pretty much filled with mobs. And in this particular case, when she wrote about this story, for this reporting, she got lots of threats. And she says that anonymous people on social media threatening you and abusing you, that is still okay. She faced a lot of that. But Anbumani Ramadas himself called up the editor of the office, mentioned Kavin's name in particular, and said that why is this person particularly writing so many bad things against us? I will come to make me come to your editorial meeting, and I will speak to everyone and clarify my position. So then this particular editor didn't know what to do, and he asked the managing director, who then said, okay, I will deal with it. And he said, if he wants to come, okay, let him come, but let him fix an appointment, fix it, ask for a particular time, and then we will see if we have that time, and then he can come in.
No, come for an interview and get through the interview?
Oh, come for an actual interview. We'll fix a time and come for an actual interview to our office, and then we will do it. And he apparently said that I'll say it directly, and she is thankful for that kind of support that the editor gave her, and she's just alarmed at how angry these people can get. The group that can burn 3 villages and kill Dalit young men, and they can't bear a single piece of writing, and then they get so angry that they want to fire journalists and they want to threaten them. And she also said that she's saying this here because when she was facing so much violence there, that's when she got in touch with NWMI. Also put out a statement, and that did help her. But just simply covering issues that are even burning issues and mainstream issues is not so easy, given how people don't expect journalists to actually question and write directly in the way that Kavin did. Thank you so much, Kavin.
சின்ன கிளாரிஃபிகேஷன், அந்த இன்டர்வியூக்கு வர சொல்றது அப்பாயின்மெண்ட் அப்படி இல்ல, வந்து என்ன சொல்றது, வேலைக்கு இன்டர்வியூ.
Oh, okay. Actually, she's saying that for a job interview.
Then only you can be
in the editorial meeting. Wow.
Okay.
Fantastic.
So her clarification is that actually what he said, the editor said, was that all right, if you want to come to the office, then you have to
join the editorial
then you have to join the office. So please come for a job interview. Sorry. And now we'll go to Neelam. So thanks for your patience, and I'm sorry again to have very little time. Neelam said that she will talk about her long years of reporting. One issue, please, can we have some respect for our speakers? And Neelam says that she wants to talk about trade unions and how invisible they are in our papers.
Hello.
She's.
Hi everybody. मैं आपके सामने हिंदी में ही बोलना चाहूंगी क्योंकि मैंने हिंदी से ही जर्नलिज्म स्टार्ट किया है। आशा है आप थोड़ा बहुत समझेंगे। मैं ज्यादा नहीं बोलूंगी क्योंकि मुझे अभी सोचा नहीं था कि मैं बोलूंगी, क्योंकि टाइम इतना कम है तो जो मैं बोलना चाहती हूँ बहुत लंबा चौड़ा है, तो मुझे एज ए दिल्ली चैप्टर मुझे थोड़ा अपने आप पे भी कंट्रोल करना पड़ेगा। एक्चुअली हुआ ऐसा कि ट्रेड यूनियंस के साथ मैं काफी अरसे से जुड़ी रही हूँ और पत्रकारों की ट्रेड यूनियन के साथ बहुत ज्यादा मेरा रहा है। तो 94 के समय से हम लोग बहुत एक्टिव रहे हैं, उससे पहले भी काफी एक्टिव रहे हैं। एसटी के उसमें भी हम लोगों ने बहुत काम किया और पेट्रियट के लिए भी काम किया। तो उस चीज के उस समय से जो हम लोगों की खबरें हैं वो मेन स्ट्रीम में कभी भी कवर नहीं हुई। जनसत्ता या हिंदू में थोड़ा बहुत एक कॉलम में दे दिया जाता था, लेकिन एसटी, टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया या उस समय तो ऐसा कुछ इलेक्ट्रॉनिक मीडिया इतना ज्यादा होता नहीं था, तो दूरदर्शन तो कभी इस चीजों को लेता ही नहीं था। तो इस तरह की चीजें मैं आप लोगों से काफी कुछ शेयर करना चाहती, लेकिन वक्त बहुत कम है। तो मेरा ये कहना है कि हम लोग कहाँ पर हैं, हम पत्रकारों के साथ ही, हमारे ही यूनियंस के साथ उस तरह का बर्ताव किया जाता है कि आपकी चीजों को, आपके जो आपके स्टेटमेंट्स हैं उनको कवर नहीं किया जाता। हमारा दिल्ली यूनियन ऑफ जर्नलिस्ट है, वो कब से स्टेटमेंट देता है, लेकिन उसकी कवरेज कहाँ होती है, या आपके इश्यूज हैं कवरेज कहाँ होती है। मेरा खुद का एक वाक्य है कि जयललिता के समय प्रोटेस्ट हुआ था दिल्ली में बहुत बड़ा,